am very, very excited to introduce today's SAFL seminar speaker, Haruko Wainwright. So as you can see, she comes to us from MIT, where she actually has a few different positions there. So I have to check my notes. She is a Mitsui Career Development Professor in Contemporary Technology. Saw that it's on your website, so I got to say it, right? And she is also an assistant professor in the nuclear science and engineering department, as well as in the civil and environmental engineering department. So for her academic background, Haruko received her bachelor's degree in engineering physics and nuclear engineering at Kyoto University, and then moved on to Berkeley, where she received both a master's degree in statistics as well as a PhD in nuclear engineering. And actually, before joining at MIT, she started there in 2022, but before that, for 11 years, she was at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. She was a staff scientist there in the Earth and Environmental Sciences program, as well as an adjunct professor at UC Berkeley's Nuclear Engineering Department. So maybe you can guess by the department affiliations that she's been part of, that much of her research aims to establish environmental resilience in nuclear engineering to better prepare for, respond to, and recover from nuclear accidents and associated environmental contamination. So I want to point out, though, that her work has definitely extended well beyond topics of nuclear contamination. She has worked extensively on various types of earth and environmental systems, types of problems. They include work from, looking at my notes, she's done a lot.
Thank you.
She's worked on a lot of topics: hydrogeophysics, watershed science, remote sensing, CO2 sequestration, actually precision agriculture as well. And I think, though, I think she really nicely, I think, describes in her webpage, though, why a lot of her focus has been on nuclear contamination. She shares that personally. She comes from a part of Japan where there are a lot of nuclear facilities and really grew up concerned about those impacts. But I think really underlying all the work that she's done are the really innovative techniques that she works in developing, really innovative sensor technologies, modeling techniques for contaminant transport, and increasingly, I think these days, she's really leading the way in machine learning. So she is the lead and co-lead of a number of different interdisciplinary projects through the Department of Energy, and I have definitely been part of her fan club, going to her talks and really, being challenged by all the really new methods that she's pushing forward. So I think just given all that she does with methods as well as the different applications, I hope that many of you have had really rich conversations with her today, and I think we're really excited to hear about your work today on machine learning for watershed science, capturing Bedrock-to-Canopy Co-Variability and Hydrologic dynamics. So thanks so much for being here today. And yes, coming from Boston, so I think many of you remember this is actually a rescheduled seminar because flying between Boston and Minneapolis, I guess we should have known not to try to schedule it in February, but we did. They only got, like 3 feet of snow or something like that. So anyway, I'm glad you could come on a day where it actually was okay weather at those places.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a great introduction. I feel pressure to give my talk. Thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you so much for coming to my talk. So I do, as Christelle said, I do many things, but this talk is focused more on the watershed science, hydrology, and especially sort of how to characterize heterogeneous watershed systems. First, oops, doesn't work for some reason. Okay. First, I'd like to acknowledge my team. I have been in this project for the past 15 years almost. Berkeley Lab leads the Watershed project, Watershed Science Focus Area. The project focus has shifted from like contaminant transport to subsurface general science, biogeochemistry to watershed science. I would say I grew up in this program and project, and I would also like to acknowledge the sponsor, Department of Energy, Office of Science, Biological Environmental Research Program. And I would also acknowledge two people in my group in the side of civil and environmental engineering. Haruko is a postdoc. He's been working on more sensor, hydrological model integration, and Evan is my master's student. She has been working on remote sensing data and spatial data analysis. So my research in general has been focused on data integration of different types of data set. Now, Earth system characterization and monitoring is really exciting. We have different sensors, subsurface sensors, geophysics, we have drones, airborne and satellite remote sensing. We can integrate these data sets to inform predictive models like watershed models. And I came out of sort of stochastic hydrology, groundwater hydrology. The goal often is to parameterize model. Particularly, I work a lot on contaminant transport models for nuclear contamination. But sometimes I just stop here. I just parameterize the model, provide parameters to modelers. So I work on a different domains. So as I mentioned, Earth system characterization monitoring is really exciting. There are challenges. For example, these different types of measurements provide data sets that have different accuracy, coverage, footprints, and resolution. We have a way to integrate these data sets in a consistent manner. And we want to take advantage of proxy information. For example, plant topography are good proxy for soil properties. I will show that later. Or I often use electrical conductivity as a proxy for contaminant concentration in subsurface. And I have been using different algorithms to integrate data sets for different methods for different purposes, including Bayesian inference, random forest method, and deep learning method. I would also note that in the past 10 years, the game changer is this sort of open data, open science. We have all the satellite images, for example, on Google Earth Engine. We can download streamflow dataset from USGS by one line of this code. So I often tell my students, like once upon a time, right, we had to download each data set one by one to save it to the Excel spreadsheet, or we passed around Excel spreadsheet from the data person to the modelers. That has changed, and I think this is the good change. I think that the availability of remote sensing data set or all the geospatial data layers has been transforming the Earth system characterization. With that, this is the outline of my presentation. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay? Sorry, maybe I shouldn't move this so much. Okay, so I have sort of three topics, the two major topics. First, I will spend most of my time actually watershed science in mountainous watershed. I will talk about Bedrock-to-Canopy characterization and how to characterize soil-plant interaction at the watershed scale. And I will show the application of both supervised and unsupervised machine learning approaches. The second part is to utilize local soil moisture sensors for drought flood monitoring applications. Here, we are developing real-time data simulation methodology and forecasting based on physics-integrated machine learning. And at the end, I will talk more about educational activity on environmental monitoring. So our watershed science project is based in Rocky Mountain. It is really beautiful place. I do rock climb, so I like to see rocks, but this watershed has beautiful flowers, rivers. It's a super beautiful place. And this place is actually called wildflower capital of US. So many wildflowers here. And this watershed is really important for the Western US. So this Upper Colorado Basin is called Water Tower of the West. So this Upper Colorado Basin provide water to downstream all the western states, like southwestern states, including California. It provides 85% of Colorado River, which serves 44 million people in 7 states. This is the big water resource. So our watershed is called East River Watershed. It is in the middle of Colorado near Crested Butte. We have 4 subcatchments here, and we recently expanded to the neighboring watershed called Taylor Watershed. The elevation is from 2,600 meters to 4,000 meters, so it's kind of mountain to alpine alpine regions, and it has diverse plant species. We have meadows, we have conifers and aspens, and geology is also diverse. We have shale, granodiorite, and sandstones. So we can see how these heterogeneities of different compartments interact with each other. So as you expected, climate change is impacting this watershed and water resource of the West significantly. So in this watershed, snow is a big sort of water reservoir. So when there's no snow or snow is low, we usually have drought in the summer, and we see significantly lower plant activity. And this year, actually, we had the lowest snow on the record. So it's very sort of disheartening. I worry about this summer, we might not see any wildflowers, for example, and that would affect the downstream water resource significantly. So this project is multidisciplinary project, including different types of scientists. So of course we have hydrologists, geochemists, collecting river water. We do have modelers. We have significant groundwater infrastructures, groundwater wells, groundwater sensors. We collect the snow cores. We collect snow remote sensing, and we also, of course, have a lot of plant data sets as well. So I work with so many different scientists, interdisciplinary project. It's really, I really enjoy this interdisciplinary research. So we are taking sort of system science approach. We try to understand the system holistically. Let's say we try to answer this question: how climate change affect the water solute nutrient export from this mountain watershed to the downstream. We have to understand this interacting system. Let's say here is this hill slope. Geology affect groundwater flow, of course, and the flow, soil moisture affect biogeochemistry and plant dynamics, and that in turn affect soil properties and hydrology as well. So this is evolving and interacting systems, and we have to characterize each compartment from geology to hydrology to plant dynamics to biological chemistry. So in this watershed, we do have unprecedented layers of airborne remote sensing data set. So we have collected, for example, NASA Airborne Snow Observatory for snow depth, snow water equivalent. So we have map of peak SUI over the watershed multiple times. And we also have a neon hyperspectral data set. So we have mapped plant species, leaf chemistry, and also stand height across the watershed. And we have LiDAR. We can again measure the plant structure, and we have a detail of microtopography, geomorphology, and we do have airborne EM, electromagnetic survey, for geology and rock properties. So I would say that this airborne EM is very unique. So we can map shallow subsurface in terms of electrical resistivity of the subsurface. We characterize the variability in shale. So some region has very hard, like higher elevation region has hard shale, like less fractures, and we quantify the relationship with plant species. We also map the deep subsurface, so we can actually map the subsurface layers down to about 100 meter or a couple of 100 meter. Then we parameterize the 3D geological model and also porosity. So this geological model has been used for large-scale hydrological study. So my work has been to understand the relationship between these relationship among different compartments, sort of how these heterogeneous compartments are related to each other. So Bedrock-to-Canopy co-variability. And I have two lines of sort of use of machine learning. So one line is supervised machine learning. So let's say I have point measurement, let's say soil properties or some target variables. And then I try to explain these point measurements based on geospatial layers, plant types, geology, topography. And then we can identify key factors, how these, let's say, soil properties are impacted by other topography or other features. And also we can map different properties using this proxy information. The second line of use of machine learning is unsupervised machine learning. So this is understanding and identifying correlations or group of different regions, clustering, for example. Then we can sort of discover patterns and how that bedrock, for example, relate to topography, plant species. And we have so many properties or so many compartments, but we can actually reduce the dimensionality of covariant properties by taking advantage of these correlations. So I will show you first the unsupervised side. So let's see, this is all the spatial data layers. And I would say this black line is the hill slope boundaries. So we have elevation, we can calculate slope. And based on the topography, we know the aspect and calculate net potential radiation without cloud. Assuming no cloud, we have SUI, we have geology. Yeah, here's red is granodiorite, blue is shale, and sandstone is light blue. This is a mixture of three bedrock types. And this is the airborne EM, bedrock resistivity, we have plant types, and then we have NDVI, plant productivity from satellite measurements. And we kind of see sort of correlations Of course, if you go higher elevation, the slope is higher, and peak SUI, of course, there's a lot of more snow, and the NDVI decreases, for example. So we can sort of see correlation by human eyes, but we can do better with more quantitative methods. So this is just a simple pixel by pixel correlation. We have elevation, slope. TWI is topography wetness index, so like a more like converging sort of wet region, radiation, bedrock resistivity, and plant productivity, NDVI. So at this point, you see big blobs, right? This is the pixel by pixel correlation. But it's interesting that when we find some characteristic landscape, so in this case, we took the average within each hill slope. Each hill slope, we took the average and kind of things start lining up. And this is sort of aha moment, but we think that hill slope is a good unit representing the aspect, elevation, or the overall heterogeneity at the watershed scale. So we can sort of see, for example, elevation and slope correlate. Higher elevation has higher slope. We can also see bedrock resistivity correlate with elevation. So if you go higher elevation, you find harder bedrock. So yes, we cannot see subsurface, but if we look at the slope elevation, we can actually infer subsurface properties. And while I shouldn't sort of discuss causation so much based on correlation, but in terms of the physical understanding, we think that bedrock comes first. So the bedrock has heterogeneity, soft part and hard part, and soft part get erode, right? So then the soft geology become lower elevation and gentle hill slope, for example. So that's sort of our theory of causation. So bedrock starts first, and then like hard bedrock stays higher elevation, steep. And then in terms of NDVI plant productivity, we see this beautiful quadratic relationship. So in this watershed, plant productivity is water limited. So that's why if you go low elevation, plant productivity actually go down because plants don't have enough water. And then there's a kind of optimum point around 3,000 meters that plants are super happy. And then when you go up, it gets colder. And it's also soil gets thinner too. So the plant productivity goes down. So we can sort of see a quadratic relationship much better compared to the pixel by pixel relationship. So based on this hill slope scale relationship, we classified hill slope based on Gaussian mixture model clustering. So we have different properties of each hill slope, and we classify hill slopes. So these are sort of general 6 classes of hill slopes in this watershed. So we have, let's say this blue one is low elevation, south-facing grassland, fractured bedrock. So gentle hill slope means that the bedrock is fractured, and we observe that in the borehole. And the higher elevation is steeper hill slope, and either hard metamorphic shale or granite. And this hard shale or granite usually has conifers. And if you go further, higher elevation, the slopes are steep, the hill slopes are steeper and more like grassland. And north facing usually have more biomass, more forest. South facing is grassland, because this is the water limited environment. Plants are happier in the north-facing hill slopes. So this way, basically, we had so many layers of geospatial data set from like snow to geology to topography, but we can collapse these. We can collapse the spatial heterogeneity into 6 types of characteristic zones. Then we can sort of find representative locations for field measurements, for example. And at the large scale, we actually use this technique to locate where to get samples or how to plan field campaigns in this last year. So one question is, does this mean for solute transport, the original question? So this is a little bit indirect because we are looking at hill slope and solute transport is watershed. We haven't made the direct connection yet, but we can, for example, say we can look at this discharge versus nitrogen transport, nitrogen export, and it scales. But we have this bifurcation. So one type of watershed, actually south-facing watershed, grass, aspen, conifer watersheds tend to have higher export of nitrogen. And it's because more geogenic nitrogen comes from shale, and also aspen provide nutrients from leaves. On the other hand, the conifer-dominated watersheds, hill slopes, tend to have low nitrogen export because bedrock is tight and conifer does not shed so much leaves to support the nutrient export. So we can sort of, based on that zonation, we can explain export, solute transport as well. So we moved on, we moved on, the next application is the use of supervised learning. So this is more like regression. We already know the target variable in this case. The first application we did is mapping ecosystem vulnerability across the watershed. So in this watershed, there have been long-term observation, long-term experiments. So Brian Enquist's group in University of Arizona had long-term experiment, and he had a question, for example, climate change lengthen the growing season. So does that affect net ecosystem productivity up or shift longer? So that was his question. And he had 10-year data set at 5 locations in this watershed. And he actually correlated peak NEP, peak net ecosystem productivity, and June Palmer drought index. So the drought index is kind of regional index across this region. So this is telling us that when drought index is lower, which means more drought, the net ecosystem productivity goes down. So it means that drought, of course, causes net ecosystem productivity going down. But the drought here is correlated with snow accumulation. So in the future, snow is going down, snow is decreasing. So he predicted that the net ecosystem productivity would go down as well. So we wanted to scale this observation from these 5 points to watershed scale. And as you imagine, we looked into Landsat images, like historical Landsat images, and we can calculate annual peak NDVI across the watershed every year for the 13 years or so. At the same time, we calculated drought index in this across the watershed, and also we have the historical snow record. So basically, we built the regression like peak NDVI as a function of drought index. Then we were able to map the drought sensitivity across the watershed. So this region, red, has high drought sensitivity. So this region is more vulnerable. This region is actually on top of the glacial moraine. So it's very permeable soil. So this region loses water fast. And also we see the effect of aspect. Of course, like if you go too high, there's no plants, right? It's just rock. So there's no sensitivity. So then we wanted to explain how why some locations have high drought sensitivity versus others. So we had elevation, aspect, and plant types, different geospatial layers, and we put them into regression again. What are the key factors? And in this paper, we found that the key factors are elevation, aspect, and geology. So I guess what's new here was the impact of geology. So geology could mediate the impact or exacerbate the impact of climate change. So next, we moved on to mapping the soil properties based on supervised learning. Soil properties important for soil moisture retention, of course, and other ecosystem functions. And soil properties are heterogeneous across this watershed, particularly because we have different geology and the elevation range is so big. Here, our goal was to estimate soil texture, clay, sand, silt content. Unfortunately, we had 300 soil cores, surface soil cores across the watershed. And we can also validate, we can check how that affects soil moisture based on soil moisture sensors as well. So first, we looked at the national scale soil map. It's called Polaris, created by USGS. Have you seen Polaris? Like Sugo, you use Sugo? Yeah, I think the Polaris people say it's better than Sugo. But I guess the main application has been sort of agriculture. Most of the data sets are in kind of eastern US. There are not so many data sets, I assume, in the mountainous watershed. So this is the correlation between Polaris map versus measured for the clay content. So we are actually surprised that, the intrusive rock, it's actually on the 1-to-1 line. But other bedrock types, for example, shale, is not accounted. The measured has much more variability compared to the Polaris one. So we looked into how the national map was developed. So its geology information is there, but most of the high elevation is actually intrusive rock, volcanic rock. So shale is very underrepresented in the mountainous region. And probably they didn't have data sets. That's why it's not represented here. In addition, the resolution of this national scale map is not so fine. So we decided to create our own clay texture map, and we used the random forest regression. This is sort of my go-to model these days. When we have strong predictors, it's the case here. It is a non-parametric tree-based approach. And we actually tried neural network. Random forest works better because I think that the 300 measurements are still not enough for neural network. That's my sort of interpretation. So if we have images or 1,000 data sets, neural network work much better. But in this case, point measurement, sparse measurement, in my experience, random forest works much better. And we have different geospatial layers. The key here is we had geologic map, and we calculated also distance to the intrusive rock, different to the different geology. So this is the map of the accuracy of percent clay. So here is the predicted versus measured. We got R-square of 0.06, which is good in my sort of experience working on geology, geophysics, correlation of 0.8. So we can look at the parameter importance metric. So the highest parameter, most important parameter was the distance to the intrusive rock. So if you go far away from intrusive rock, the clay content increase. So within shale, basically clay content is higher. So if you go into, if you go away from the intrusive rock, clay content increases. We can also see the impact of solar radiation. So south-facing hill slope tend to have coarse sediment, coarse soil. So the percent clay goes down in the south-facing hill slope, for example. So we can explain soil texture as a function of these geospatial layers. So here is the map of percent clay across the watershed. So in the northeastern region, we can see the impact of aspect. Again, north-facing hill slope has more forest and I think more moisture, which create finer sediments. And in the lower elevation, we see a lot of land cover type impact and NDVI, higher NDVI, higher productivity. In this case, means more clay because clay holds more moisture that helps plants. In the central region, we see a strong impact of this granitic rock. So the higher elevation, this granitic rock tend to have more sandy, coarse soil. So we can map the soil texture, which we are pretty happy about it. And we have provided this to watershed modelers. Then we want to see how this soil texture impacts soil moisture. This is Evan actually measuring permeability or taking soil core right next to soil moisture sensor. This is actually this is the MET station, a low-cost MET station. There's rain gauge, temperature sensor, and we have low-cost soil sensors, snow sensors as well. And we want to see the relationship between soil moisture and soil texture along with other spatial variables. Before putting soil moisture sensors, we actually did sensor network design. So before we placed soil moisture, we actually had soil saturation, snowmelt timing model that was from DRI, Rosemary Carroll. So we had the model results of soil moisture across the watershed. And yes, if you do model results are not perfect, right? Not perfect, but it's still useful, I would say. Along with we have plant productivity maps and also different layers, topography layers. So we run cluster analysis. So here are different types of spatial layers and how the locations, sensor locations or hill slopes located within these co-varied parameter space. We also looked at the current soil moisture or measurement locations compared to all the pixels, blue, and all the pixels accessible by the road. So it's here. So you can sort of see that the current, like so soil moisture network before we install are heavily biased in one region. So something that we have to be careful is that we tend to place sensors where it's convenient, right? So we are looking for keys under light because we can find it if there are, right? It's limited. So if you actually ask AI or statistical method where to go, we kind of end up like that, right? So I like this figure. I do rock climb. Oh, this is great job, but probably most people don't want that. And in the reality, our sensors, some of the sensors look like this. You can see, so this is the slope, right? And this is the tree. So it's very, very steep. And we have students who are great at hiking, who love hiking, fortunately. He goes out like 1 hour to get measurements, sensor data from these sensors. So now we have data sets. So this is sort of the example of soil moisture data set at 2 locations. So after rain, soil moisture goes up and soil moisture decay. And we looked at this drawdown speed, how it decays during summer without impact of snow. We think that that's more representative of soil properties. We also looked at the mean value of soil moisture within the growing season. That's important for plant productivity. So this is how soil moisture, how heterogeneous soil moisture is. So, that low moisture is red, high moisture is blue because it's more water. So higher elevation tends to have high moisture average, and that's where sort of higher, lower depletion, higher retention in the higher elevation. Lower elevation has lower mean value and faster drawdown, lower retention. But if we look close at each kind of cluster site, it looks like this. Even within this like 100-meter site, we see a big difference in soil moisture. One site, this site is close to the river. It's more converging location, and like a lowest soil moisture is more south-facing slope. And so we looked at the co-variability between soil moisture and other spatial data set, and we use spatial clustering. We use the clustering again. We only have 36 sensor locations, so quantitative evaluation is always hard. So making these clusters, making groups of sensor locations somehow make it easier for us to interpret. So clustering is useful for ecosystem sort of understanding where the variability is very high. So we can look at this mean soil moisture, and we have this drawdown rate. So we have these 2 groups, higher soil moisture and lower soil moisture, and also higher soil moisture site is very slow drawdown, which makes sense. So we have 2 groups here, and it's mostly related to elevation, higher elevation, lower elevation, which is kind of boring, right? It's very boring, but we can look a little bit more closer. We can look closer within high elevation sites. Orange has higher moisture, even though the elevation is lower. So this site actually, these sites have higher wetness index, so it's a converging location. And actually the clay content is higher too. And as you kind of intuitively see that converging location collect water, but also collect clay fine sediments too. So everything is somewhat correlated. Another thing to point out here, there is a mid-elevation cluster here group that's sort of higher drawdown and mid sort of to lower soil moisture. This is the place that clay content is very low. So even though the elevation is slightly higher, soil moisture is low probably because of lower clay content. So we can start see the co-variability between soil moisture and other spatial layers as well. So that's sort of, we are trying to understand the spatial heterogeneity of soil moisture dynamics. So the grand vision that we want to go eventually is we want to predict the soil moisture everywhere at any time in this watershed, because we have actually sensor that running all the time, and we want to improve the mapping of soil moisture as a function of space and time. So that's a pretty big goal. So we started somewhat small, so one sensor scale. So we worked on real-time sort of sensor data integration at one soil sensor location. And I was fortunate to find Haruko. He was a postdoc. He actually came from more practical application, like a drought flood warning in the city. But I'm hoping that once we have this, we can use it for the watershed application as well. So the goal is here to couple soil moisture sensor in the subsurface with a hydrological model. So we have a hydrological model, Bedrock flow model, evaporation, flow downstream, and we have 1D Richards equation. Probably you have seen that. Sorry, I think I'm looking at the clock. I know I have to go a little bit faster. So we have built this data simulation framework. So simulation is running. So every delta T simulation is running, and data is ingested every delta T. So the data assimilation gets done every day at this, or every day at this point. So that every time step assimilation looks like this. So this is based on the common filter and sub-common filter approach. So every time step we initiate a random simulation of hydrological simulation based on different ET values, and we have ensemble, and this creates the prior distribution, and then data gets ingested and then merged here to create the posterior distribution and goes to the next time step. So this is the result here. So of course we kind of nudge the prediction to the observation data set. So this is the sensor data set versus prediction estimation. This works, of course, matches, but here, because we have hydrological simulation, we can extrapolate to the subsurface 3D. So although the sensor is one location in the soil, we can estimate the soil moisture in the depth. We can also project into the future. So here is the common filter estimation. The forecast starts, soil moisture go down, it's predicted, and we can also provide a confidence interval. And he has established a workflow. So we estimate the evapotranspiration based on the analytical solution. And we have a procedure to calibrate the hydrological model. And then we can do real-time assimilation and focusing, and we can sort of visualize data set. And we are hoping to sort of move from here, the point scale, to more like a large scale, like a space in time as a next step. So last 5 minutes, sorry, I mean, a little bit late. I work also on like citizen science, environmental monitoring development. As Crystal mentioned, I'm from rural part of Japan. I grew up worrying about nuclear facility in my region. Here in Alaska, people worry about mining facilities, for example. And I teamed up with University of Alaska, which operates summer camps and after school for high school students. So we can use, let's say, sensors to do like a brine test of water. So we have TDS sensor, pH sensor, so we can measure, we can identify which is the brine, distilled water. It was pretty fun. And we go out field. It's beautiful. Kids love going out. And we also went to water treatment facility, and kids start asking like where our water comes. And some kids also ask like where wastewater goes, right? So that, yeah, going to the wastewater facility would be our next step. We created the story map, so that's kind of communicating what we did. Last year, I also worked with Navajo Nation as well. So here, my collaborator, Benjamin Deans, actually combined sort of river geomorphology with oral history. So this place had flooding, or why we have town at higher ground, for example, and or like oral history of flood, like big flooding, right? Like a Noah the Ark kind of story in Navajo Nation. So it kind of stimulated more of their interests. And I learned how to excite kids. For example, measurements are not exciting, I was told. So then sort of, okay, we can actually make filters, and then we can measure, water, how the filters work. Some filters are kind of sloppy. It runs fast, but water was still dirty, for example. Students learn kind of trade-offs, right? Or a high school teacher told us that we can make a science poster as an art. And that also somewhat stimulate the students' interest, particularly those who are not usually interested in science, but come to sort of, if they have to make beautiful poster, they're super excited. So this is the poster about water. It was nice. So here is the summary of my presentation. Sorry that maybe I was too long. So I talked about watershed science, spatial machine learning, spatial machine learning for watershed characterization. Unsupervised machine learning is useful for sort of pattern recognition, understanding the co-variability. Supervised learning, mapping different properties, soil properties, drought sensitivities, and we are moving towards more real-time data simulation for coupling sensor information, hopefully with spatial data set in the next step. And thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Particle, yeah, this is the particle size, like more like a flow test, sort of, yeah. That's a hard question. Yeah, we haven't looked into it. It's an interesting question. I guess we could use XRD to identify different types of clay, but yeah, we didn't do it this time. That's a good extension, I think.
Okay, I think I turned it on this time.
Thank you for the great talk. I want to learn more about the watershed zonation, how it works. Like, so you had 6 categories of watershed, right? So did clustering naturally led to the 6 watershed types, or did you first define the 6 types and try to find under what conditions that these 6 zones emerge? Like, I want to better understand, how did you define the 6 zones?
6 zones, it came from like unsupervised. So it came out of unsupervised.
So it naturally emerged by clustering?
Right.
Okay.
But there is some subjectiveness, probably like 6 or 7 or 5, but 6 made more sense. So or going beyond, yeah.
So is it like continuous transition, or is it very discrete 6 zones that you can more or less define?
It's often somewhat continuous, I would say.
Okay.
You don't see like, here's the cluster, here's cluster. So it's somewhat, I mean, I would say that some clusters are very distinct, but some of them are mixed. That's why we tend to use sorry, I should have noted the Gaussian mixture modeling. Gaussian mixture model clustering also provides the probability and provides the uncertainty measure. So each hill slope, let's say each hill slope has the probability of like 0.9 to be zone 1, or that sort of some uncertainty measure. So we prefer to use the Gaussian mixture model. But I guess when we publish clustering, we always get how you define the number of clusters. And I think I spend so much time figuring that out. But as I get older, I think that it is useful. Like, it's still somewhat defining these sort of 6 types that represent range of properties. It's still useful. Last year, for example, we had another big neon campaign, airborne campaign. We had to arrange like 50 sites across the different locations, and this sort of compressing sort of multi-dimensional spatial data set to like 6 zone or 7 zone, it's still useful. I would stop that.
Thank you.
You made a comment earlier on about neural networks being very data hungry. And you said you thought for the limited sample size you had, the random forest approach was more viable, maybe less biased. I was just curious about, do you think if the data points had been more dispersed across the study domain and its heterogeneity, would that have made the neural net any better behaved? You know, are the bias of the observation points part of the story too, or is it really just a data hungry, a data size question?
That's a good question. I also think that the neural network, the more sophisticated one, like a convolutional network, for example, traditionally they have been developed for images, right? So that's how I feel like when we have images, I tend to use a neural network. That works better. But sparse measurement, like maybe if we have like 1,000 measurements, maybe neural network might work better. But when I have like, let's say 20 to 300 samples, in my experience, like Gaussian process model or random forest, those work better than the neural network. Doesn't? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So one follow-up question I would ask is, as a plant person who's familiar with this watershed, I look at your categories and I think, oh, the plants are telling you the whole story. You know, the distribution of the plants combined with aspect and elevation gives you the whole story. Maybe that's not quite right, but I'm just curious, have there yet been like any aha moments where you guys realized there's like, the story is here in a simpler, more evident to a casual observer way? Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think that this plants, I think largely, yeah, plants are, my colleagues say plants as soil sensors. So I think that, yeah, plants are very informative, but I think that the topography, sort of this plant aspect and slope, if you want to know subsurface, I think that's another story as well. I mean, I always look from the airplane outside, and I always look at like slope and like cliffs and bedrock, and like conifers are always steep hill slopes. So I'm trying to I think I haven't worked like larger domain, but that would be an interesting question. Is this hold across Sierra or across Rocky Mountain? That would be my next step.
Thank you.
For your clustering, how the scale of the data impact the final result. For example, you have the resistivity data, which is
Scale, that resolution?
yeah.
Or?
What the resistivity data is something like have a higher correlation length of another data, for example. And another question is how the purpose of the investigation changed the cluster areas, and how you can like kind of impose this in your model.
You mean that the second question is how the purpose informed the approach?
It's changed the clustered areas, because like I believe different investigation will lead, like, have different processes, and each variable impact it more or less.
Yeah, I think so. I would go from the first question. It is like the scale of data or scale of heterogeneity. We actually looked at the hill slope size, and actually, like a river network is fractal, kind of, right? So if you set the different sort of threshold to become river, you can actually have a different hill slopes size. You can actually have more rivers, and then you have more smaller hill slopes, right? So we investigated the size, and we actually found the size that have the highest correlation among different spatial sort of covariates. So I mean, like, we think that at some scale, like, I think that representing the aspect is very important in this watershed, for example, like the south-facing, north-facing, this is sort of the very deterministic for the water-limited environment. So it could be very different here in Minnesota. This is very water-limited environment, and this north-facing, south-facing has a big impact on the evapotranspiration, and that's what we see the plant species, for example. So kind of large enough area to represent this aspect, that's we thought is the good scale of hill slope size. The second question, in terms of the goal of use of this approach, I think that we tend to use this for kind of planning purposes, where to put like plots, experimental plots. In terms of the scale, it's interesting that, at this hill slope clustering, elevation aspect are the dominant sort of, the more like orthogonal, like primary sort of predictors. And then other properties often sort of correlate, like geology, bedrock hardness correlate with elevation, for example. Slope correlate with elevation as well. But when we look at the soil properties, for example, we see some similar control, like, well, bedrock is there, solar radiation elevation, right? So in this case, the soil property mapping is pixel by pixel. So yeah, we haven't actually start thinking too hard, but like pixel by pixel simulation versus hill slope scale simulation, we see that same control, same sort of dominant parameters. So that's kind of interesting. We were hoping to see something different, but we ended up the same. I hope I answered.
Thank you so much. Based on first part of your presentation, as the elevation goes up, the slope also, there is a right correlation between elevation and the slope. And based on the third part of your actually study, as the elevation goes up, the soil moisture also goes up.
Right.
So, but when we see higher slope, I think the penetration should decrease and the soil moisture should decrease. How do we see that?
Yeah, like a soil moisture is kind of a function of not just the soil properties, but also ET, right? We are looking at the near surface soil moisture, so higher elevation, lower temperature, so the evaporation, transpiration is lower. So it's not just a downward transport, but also sort of upward. That's, I think it's the combination of all of those, I think.
Thank you.
The last question.
Thank you for the great talk. I'm wondering, when you're using these machine learning techniques and kind of parsing out the relationships here, how do you think about translating these relationships to like physical models or gaining insights into, because I work a lot with similar like correlations between variables, but then translating that to like equations and like a cohesive understanding can
Yeah, so my primary goal is often sort of provide parameters, like sort of properties to the models, right? And once I did kind of combining sort of machine learning approach with model to predict the soil properties, for example, like soil thickness, we have soil diffusion equation to kind of model soil thickness. So we can combine it, similar to the soil moisture, right? Soil moisture, we can combine model and data. But often that for spatial mapping, it sounds good, but it's actually pretty hard because, like, let's say soil diffusion model, we need initial condition, right? And we don't have an good initial condition to start with, like that. So that made it actually hard. So I think it would be nice to include more physics knowledge, like a physics-informed machine learning, physics-informed, physics-guided machine learning. That would be nice, yes. But yeah, so we tried before, often data-driven model, somehow, okay, good enough. But I think there is a lot of room to improve.
Okay, well, I think let's thank Haruko once more for coming and sharing.
Thank you.